What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are going to be talking about this incredible free agent running back class. There are so many good free agents in this running back class. It is kind of crazy. There's probably like 6 guys who used to be RB1s for fantasy football. So we're going to be talking about that today. If you guys haven't watched the other videos in this series, we've talked about the quarterbacks and the wide receivers so far. You guys can watch those videos right here. So if you haven't watched them, go watch them after this video. They'll also be linked in the description. But like I said, today, free agent running backs, we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about potential landing spots and where I think these players are going to be playing in 2024. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's talk about what the potential free agent running back market is going to look like as far as the teams involved. Now, if you guys are here and you're wondering why does this type of stuff matter for fantasy football, specifically Dynasty fantasy football, the short answer to this question is we are trying to project the outcomes of these players because being able to do so is going to allow you to find gaps in value where we can project value increases in Dynasty fantasy football or even value decreases. So that is the short answer of what we're trying to do today. If you want a longer, more detailed explanation, there is one in that quarterback video that I talked about. It was the first video in this series. So go check that out for a detailed and longer explanation. But if the short version is good enough for you, that's good with me. So let's start looking at these teams that could be in the potential free agent running back market. You see them on the screen right now. And the thing about this type of projection is I looked at a couple different variables. The first one is cap space. Which teams have cap space that they could potentially be in the market to spend on one of these running backs? Because the running back market in general in the NFL, we understand is not a very highly coveted market. They aren't paying these guys a ton of money, but the good ones are going to still get a decent chunk of change. It just may not be those super big contracts that we've been used to seeing in the past, but I would say that most of these guys we're going to talk about today fall in between that 10 million to 7 million annual basis range. And so I wanted to look at cap space and see which teams currently had the availability to make a type of signing like that at a luxury position. Now, the second thing that I was looking at was team opportunity. Which teams need running backs in the backfield? Which teams are losing running backs in the backfield into the free agent pool this year? And who is likely to add a running back to their team because of opportunity? These are the different variables that I was looking at. You see the teams that I think could be in the market on the screen. Now, obviously, these teams are the teams that checked one of those 2 boxes that I was talking about, but we need to look at it a little bit deeper and decide who actually will be in the free agent market. Because even though these teams could be in that free agent market, we need to know who really is a buyer in this market. And I did cross off the Los Angeles Chargers and the Dallas Cowboys. As it sits right now, both of these teams are in negative cap space situations. The Chargers are 29th in the NFL with negative $20 million. I cannot foresee them spending money on a running back if they don't have the cap space right now. And the Dallas Cowboys, not in as rough of shape. They are 26th in the NFL. They are sitting at negative $3 million in cap space. So they will need to open that up. There is a chance potentially that they could be in the free agent running back market, but because they are currently sitting negative, I am going to cross them off of it. But I do think that both of these teams are going to be teams that are highly in play for rookie running backs in the NFL draft later this spring. But for the free agent market, I think that they are going to be out. So what does that really leave us with? We're looking at this market right here. These are the 13 teams that I think could be real buyers in this free agent market. So I think without wasting any more time, let's start talking about who the prospects are, and we can start talking about what they should be expecting for running back contracts and where I think that they are going to play in 2024. So with that being said, we use SpoTrack for our contracts. They are projecting a market value for each of these players, and the number one most anticipated free agent running back, according to SpoTrack, is going to be Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. And right now, they are calculating a market value for Josh Jacobs of about $10.6 million per year. Now, you look at that market value on screen. They're saying they think Josh Jacobs is going to sign a 4-year, $42 million contract. That is a little bit of a longer contract than we expect for running backs in this market. Now, Jacobs is only 26 years old. He is coming off of a season here in 2023 where he went for 800 rushing yards, 296 receiving yards, and 6 total touchdowns. He was averaging about 13.9 fantasy points per game. That was 18th in the NFL for you if you played Dynasty Fantasy Football. And when you look at that contract projection for Josh Jacobs, you're looking at some comparable players here. Some of those players are going to be Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, James Conner, and Jonathan Taylor. All of those guys got average annual salaries between that $7 million and $14 million range. I think that is probably the range of outcomes for Josh Jacobs. I just don't know if that 4-year length is going to be ideal for Jacobs in this type of market. But you look at this and you say, hey, where is Josh Jacobs going to be playing in 2024? Well, my first prediction and where I think Jacobs will be is going to be with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he is going to remain here in Las Vegas. And you look at what Josh Jacobs is to this offense. Obviously, Antonio Pierce, the new head coach, official full-time head coach there in Las Vegas. And right now, the depth chart without Josh Jacobs on it is Zamir White, Brandon Bolden, Austin Walters, Sincere McCormick, a bunch of random dudes. Amir Abdullah is a free agent as well. But when you look at what Josh Jacobs did for the Las Vegas Raiders in 2022, he was 56% of their carries and 10% of their targets out of the backfield. He was a major part of their offense. I think Josh Jacobs wants to remain in Las Vegas. I think the Raiders want him to remain in Las Vegas. We know that in the past, they haven't been able to come to terms to a long-term contract, but it does seem obvious that both sides want them to play together here in Las Vegas for the foreseeable future. I think they make it happen this offseason. I don't know if it's going to be a long 4-year deal like they are projecting, but I do think that they can get a 2 or 3 year extension done here this offseason, and I don't expect them to hit him with a franchise tag. But with that being said, we look at where is a second best scenario for Josh Jacobs and what happens if the Raiders don't re-sign Josh and he does go test the open market. I do think a likely scenario would be the Houston Texans here, and you got to look at what the Houston Texans are putting together here. This is a team that is currently 6th overall in cap space. They have almost $74 million. I think they have the potential to be big spenders here this free agency. And I do think that this is a team that feels like they have found their franchise quarterback. Obviously, we all like what CJ Stroud went and did this year. I think they think after making the playoffs in 2023 that this is a team that could be in a contending window potentially. If they feel like they need to spend on some luxury positions, you definitely do that when you are in a contending window. Give Josh Jacobs to this Houston Texans offense. They have a good offensive line, a good offense in general. I think this will elevate the Houston Texans and truly make them the kings of the AFC South. And even when you look at the depth chart that they have over there in Houston, Devin Singletary and Dare Ogunbowale are both free agents this year. That is over 50% of the carries that they took in 2023. They are going to be looking for a running back. If it is not Devin Singletary, why not take a swing and get a stud in Josh Jacobs? Now, moving on to our second free agent here in this anticipated market, we are going to be talking about Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. He is going to be the oldest of the running backs that we talk about in today's video, but he's coming off of a season here in 2023 where he went for 1,167 rushing yards, 214 receiving yards, and 12 total touchdowns. He scored 14.5 fantasy points per game. That was good for 16th in the NFL. And when we are looking at the calculated market value of what Derrick Henry is projected to make from an average annual salary basis, they are saying $10.3 million. You look at that market value over there, they are also projecting a 1-year contract for the 30-year-old Derrick Henry. I think that is probably a smart move for the age of Derrick Henry. Just give him a 1-year deal, have him go to potentially a contending team and see what he has left in the tank. You see he's coming off of that current contract here where he made $12.5 million as the average annual salary. Some of the comparable players to this are Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, James Conner. And like I mentioned, when you look at this type of contract, you look at this type of player, I'm thinking Derrick Henry needs to go to a contending roster, a team that feels like they are just a running back away or potentially a playmaker away on offense. When I look at those teams, a couple of them stick out. They don't have a ton of cap space, but the first and my prediction for where Derrick Henry is going to land is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. So right now, at the time of this recording, Baltimore is currently sitting 21st in the NFL in cap space. They have about $16.5 million available today. So Derrick Henry could be in that market for the Baltimore Ravens. He would be pretty expensive compared to what they have available, but I do think it is a scenario that could happen. And when we look at the depth chart that they have over there in Baltimore right now, going into 2024, we're looking at Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, Ricky Person Jr. They have free agents of their own in Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Dalvin Cook. That was about 38% of the carries and 4% of the targets out of their backfield last year. Obviously, Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell had some play in 2023, but those were not actually designed for this team going into the preseason of the 2023 year. I think you get a guy like Derrick Henry, you add him with Lamar Jackson, you have him be there with Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. This is a team that had a chance to make a play at potentially making a Super Bowl here in 2023. Does Derrick Henry push this team over the hump? There's a chance that it does. I think this is a Hail Mary type of swing for the Baltimore Ravens, and I do think it really would improve this offense and help them take that next step into the next level, assuming that Derrick Henry still has enough in the tank at 30 years old. Now moving on to the second best scenario for Derrick Henry, and we're still going to be talking about a potential contender here, a team that has a little bit more cap space than Baltimore, but the second best option is probably going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. And we look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Right now, DeAndre Swift is a free agent. It sounds like they're going to let him test the open market. You look at the depth chart that they have right now going into the 2024 season. Kenneth Gainwell, Lou Nichols, Tyrion Davis-Price. These are the running backs that they have going into the season. And like I said, Swift, a free agent, 45% of the carries, 9% of the targets. Boston Scott, Rashad Penny, also free agents. That's another 6% of your carries and 1% of your targets. So nothing major there. But I look at the cap space that they have. Yes, they have some free agents that they need to sign and keep on their own roster right now. If they are going to start spending at other positions, maybe Derrick Henry makes sense. Philly currently sitting 17th overall in the NFL with $32 million. This is a fit, a good offensive line that makes sense for Derrick Henry, where I think he could excel in a one-year deal here in Philadelphia and really give them one of the best backfields in the NFL. You have Jalen Hurts, who obviously is a rushing quarterback, does a lot with the tush push, whether you like it or not. That's what he does, and that is because of how good his offensive line is. Now, you put Derrick Henry behind that type of offensive line, I think good things could happen. That is my second most likely scenario for Derrick Henry in free agency this year. Now, moving on to the third running back in this market, we are going to be talking about Saquon Barkley, running back for the New York Giants. And Saquon Barkley is 27 years old right now. Spotrac is estimating an average annual salary of $9.9 million. They are saying this is roughly going to be a 3-year deal for Saquon Barkley. So you see it there. He is coming off of a 2023 season here where he went for 962 rushing yards, 41 receptions for 280 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. For the fantasy football players, 15.9 fantasy points per game, 9th in the NFL. Looking at the comparable contracts, you see guys like Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, James Conner, Miles Sanders. These are the type of comparable contracts that they project Saquon Barkley to sign this offseason. And when I'm looking at where Saquon could be playing in 2024, I talked about them just a second ago. Big spenders potentially in this free agent market. The Houston Texans make a ton of sense for Saquon Barkley. I'm not going to go into detail about why this makes sense. We just talked about it with Josh Jacobs. Obviously, my prediction for Jacobs was the Las Vegas Raiders, so that is likely what happens. The Texans are probably going to take a swing here. Saquon Barkley probably will be their number one candidate. You look at what Saquon Barkley could do in this offense with CJ Stroud. Obviously, they have the Devin Singletary as the free agent. We know that they have the cap space to make it happen. This could really make this Texans offense electric, and I think Saquon Barkley would be a true difference maker for the Houston Texans. And I think Saquon Barkley wants to play for a team that is up and coming, a contender. I don't see why it wouldn't make sense for both parties to have Saquon Barkley be a Houston Texan going into the 2024 season and beyond. And what is the second best option for Saquon Barkley? Well, unfortunately, I think the second best option is the New York Giants. And unfortunately for you, if you're a Giants fan, I know I say unfortunately Saquon Barkley will be with you guys. I think that is because Saquon Barkley is clearly the best weapon on this New York Giants offense. They are lacking skill players here in New York. They probably need to keep Saquon Barkley even if they don't want to. I know they are at the negotiation table right now. They don't want to use the franchise tag on Saquon Barkley, but it may be something that they end up having to do if they don't want him to test the open market. I think the best scenario for Saquon is to test the open market. I think what they have over there in New York just does not fit the timeline that Saquon Barkley has in the NFL right now as far as the rest of his career goes. But you look at what the New York Giants have as far as cap space, $38 million, not a lot, but not a little. They can still make this happen for Saquon Barkley if they want to. We know that the backfield behind Saquon has not been good. Obviously, last year, Saquon was 54% of the carries, 12% of the targets. Matt Breida, also a free agent for the Giants, 12% of the carries, 4% of the targets. So that is almost 66% of your carries, 16% of your targets. And what is left in 2024 is Deion Jackson Eric Gray, Gary Brightwell, Jashawn Corbin. Not a lot to be excited about in New York. I don't know if they let Saquon go. It feels like an ill-advised decision to let somebody like this go if you don't have the infrastructure behind him to move on from Saquon Barkley. So unfortunately, he may be stuck in New York, even though we want to see him go play for a contending team or a better roster like the Houston Texans. Moving on to our next running back in this market, it is going to be Austin Ekeler of the Los Angeles Chargers. And Austin Ekeler, another running back who is getting a little bit older, just like Derrick Henry. Austin Ekeler will be 29 years old going into the 2024 season. They're projecting an average annual salary of $7.4 million. Now, they're saying a 3-year deal for Austin Ekeler. To me, that is ludicrous. It makes no sense why Austin Ekeler, after seeing what he went and put on tape in 2023, would be able to receive a 3-year deal unless basically all the money in the last 2 years was not guaranteed and they could cut him at no cost. That would be the only way that this makes sense, but they are saying a 3-year deal for Austin Ekeler. So sure, that's fine. You see what he made in 2023, coming off of a year where he had the average annual salary of $6 million. And now the comparable players to what this type of contract would look like would be the James Connors, the Aaron Jones, the Jamal Williams, and the Joe Mixons of the world here, with that averages of about $23 million over the course of 3 years. So I guess that's where they're getting those 3 years from. But we've talked in length on this channel about the inefficiencies of Austin Ekeler in 2023. You see the statistics that he was able to put together last year: 628 rushing yards, 436 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. From a fantasy points per game perspective, 13.2 fantasy points per game. That was 21st in the NFL for Austin Ekeler. But similar to Derrick Henry, when I look at what would happen with Austin Ekeler, to me, I think this is the type of player that would be willing to take a little bit more of a discount if he could go play for a contender, somebody who could potentially play for a team that has a chance at a Super Bowl. And that, to me, my prediction for Austin Ekeler would be the Philadelphia Eagles. We talked about them losing DeAndre Swift, potentially being in on Derrick Henry. Well, if Derrick Henry lands in Baltimore like I predict, that is going to leave the Eagles still searching for a running back to come in. I think that could potentially be Austin Ekeler. And we also got to remember there is a little bit of a relationship connection here in Philadelphia. Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers last season, is now the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. So maybe there's a chance where Kellen Moore says, you know what, let's bring Austin Ekeler in. I think we can work together here in Philadelphia in a little bit better of a situation and see if we can make magic happen, kind of give it that second try here in Philadelphia. That is something that could happen. We talked about the cap space. They have enough money that they could potentially make a signing, especially if Austin Ekeler's average annual salary is $7 million. That is a little bit more doable than the Derrick Henry contract. We know that the vacated opportunities are there. I think this makes a little bit of sense for Austin Ekeler and potentially a chance for him to go play for a contender where the Eagles could potentially help Austin Ekeler bounce back after a bad 2023 season. But now I look at what is the second most likely scenario, and I try to look across the NFL, see which teams had opportunity, see which teams that had cap space that were contenders, and nothing really stuck out. But I do think if this team is willing to pay a little bit more money, Austin Ekeler could go play for this roster. They have a lot of money to spend. That is going to be the Chicago Bears. Now look at what the Chicago Bears have available in free agency this year. Currently projected $80 million in cap space. We expect the Chicago Bears to move on from Justin Fields this offseason. We expect them to draft Caleb Williams, bring him in on a rookie deal. They also have the 9th overall pick. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but there have been rumors of them potentially going a wide receiver like Rome Odunze if he is available. You add Austin Ekeler to that team with Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, and now Austin Ekeler, it could be a little bit more exciting than we think for the Chicago Bears, and that would probably make the Bears a team that could contend for the NFC North Championship. And I think when you look at the depth chart of the Bears, there really is nobody who has stood out. Khalil Herbert's been fine. He's on the team going into 2024. Roschon Johnson, fine. Didn't show us anything special in 2023, but somebody you could still build around. And Dante Foreman, who is a free agent this year, opening up about 20% of the carries, 3% of the targets. I think if you add Austin Ekeler, a veteran, to this team, he could kind of be that guy where you see if it was a bad year for you, maybe he has juice left, maybe he is still a stud for you in Chicago. If not, you have the backup weapons in Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson that you can still lean on them if you have to. But maybe you could build around Caleb Williams and give him a star-studded offense if Austin Ekeler does end up in Chicago. Now moving on to our next free agent, that is going to be DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles. And when we look at what DeAndre Swift is, 25 years old, an average annual salary expectation of about $6.7 million. You look at what he put together in 2023, 1,000 rushing yards, 200 receiving yards, 6 total touchdowns, and 12.5 fantasy points per game. Was a pretty average year for DeAndre Swift. I think a lot of us expected a bigger breakout from Swift in Philadelphia. It just didn't happen, and now he is going to test the open market. You see that market value for DeAndre Swift. Again, 25 years old. They're expecting a 4-year deal for $27 million. I think DeAndre Swift is one of the few that could get that 4-year deal in this free agent cycle just due to his age. And Swift is obviously coming off of his rookie contract here. You see some of the comparable players are Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, James Conner, Miles Sanders. Those guys just make the most sense here for a comparable contract. And I'm looking across the NFL and I'm trying to decide what would make a lot of sense for DeAndre Swift. And there really wasn't a ton of landing spots that I love. Now, the first landing spot and my prediction for DeAndre Swift that I do think makes sense is the Minnesota Vikings. And hear me out. I think Minnesota could potentially upgrade their running back room. You look at the depth chart that they have right now. Alexander Mattison, Ty Chandler. Those are the guys that they had last year, and that running back room was lacking all 2023. They did not get the production that they wanted out of that backfield. So maybe they decide they need to go out and make an upgrade this year. DeAndre Swift could potentially be that upgrade at that $6.7 million average annual salary. And you look at the cap space that they have, they're a little bit of the middle of the pack, probably closer to the top than they are the bottom, sitting right now with almost $41 million in cap space. They can open up quite a bit more cap space if they move on from Harrison Smith. Unfortunately, because Harrison Smith is one of the best and one of my favorite Vikings of all time, but I do think that they will move on from him this offseason, opening up some more cap space. And we all know that they need to probably re-sign Kirk Cousins and give an extension to Justin Jefferson, but I think DeAndre Swift just really improves this offense and does make sense for this team if they're going to be in shootouts in the NFC North with the Packers and the Lions and potentially the Caleb Williams-led Bears. So this makes a lot of sense for the Minnesota Vikings, and I think DeAndre Swift would fit well in this offense by Kevin O'Connell. And now what are we looking at for the second best scenario? Well, we talked about them already on this episode, a team that was potentially in the hunt for Derrick Henry. I think the Baltimore Ravens could make sense for DeAndre Swift if they do feel like they are still that running back away. If they miss out on Derrick Henry and don't make that happen, this is a team, like I said, that is losing a lot of opportunity in their backfield. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, these guys are gone. Maybe DeAndre Swift is a little bit more of an affordable running back that they can add to this team that still needs some value out of that running back room. And again, their cap space situations aren't incredible. They're currently sitting at about $16 million, but a $6.5 million average annual salary, maybe they can make this work for DeAndre Swift in Baltimore, where he can play with Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and really improve this team as they are trying to capitalize on this Super Bowl window that they are currently in. Now, moving on to the next running back in this video, we are going to be talking about Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys, and another running back who is going to be 27 years old going into the 2024 season, coming off of a year here where he finished with 1,000 rushing yards, 300 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. Very similar to DeAndre Swift in fantasy points per game, 13.1, good for running back 23. And I look at what Tony Pollard was able to do in Dallas this year, and obviously it was very underwhelming for a guy that looked like he could be the next RB1 in Dallas long-term after the departure of Ezekiel Elliott. And right now, when we're looking at the Spotrac market value, they are saying 2 years for $13 million is the projected contract for Tony Pollard. His previous contract obviously playing on the franchise tag here in 2023. And when we look at the comparable contracts, again, it is that group of David Montgomery, Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon. That is about the value of a Tony Pollard in today's market here in the NFL. And I look at potential teams that could use Tony Pollard's services. I think, again, we talked about them. It is going to be the Chicago Bears. We talked about them potentially being a fit for an Austin Ekeler. Maybe Eckler's too expensive. Maybe he's too old that the Bears don't want to take a swing on him. I think this would make sense for the Bears having Tony Pollard end up in Chicago. We talked about the cap space, 4th in the NFL, $80 million. The current running back room has a lot to desire. Again, just like I said with Austin Ekeler, if you build this offense as a fire-powered offense of Tony Pollard, DJ Moore, potentially Caleb Williams, Rome Odell, Odunze, Cole Kmet, this team could be a lot better in a very tough NFC North. Like I mentioned, a healthy Vikings team, a Lions team, a Packers team, all of these teams are very good, so the Bears have to get very good as well if they want to compete. Chicago, it could be the next future home of Tony Pollard, and I think it would make a ton of sense, and it would be good for both of these parties moving forward. So then we talk about what is the second best landing spot for Tony Pollard, and maybe this team can't get a deal done with their current running back. Maybe he wants too much money and they still want to have a weapon in that running back room, but they need to find a discount. They are going to be the New York Giants. We've talked about Saquon as a free agent. He is going to be much more expensive than Tony Pollard is on the open market. If the Giants can't get a deal done with Saquon, maybe they just switch their focus over to a running back like Tony Pollard. That running back room, like I said, would be losing a ton of carries. Saquon Barkley, 54% of the carries, 12% of the targets. Tony Pollard could step in, be the running back one in New York. And this is a team that, yes, they have spending, but like I said, they are going to be picky about how much they pay that running back position because they've already signed long-term contracts to guys like Daniel Jones that they might be regretting already. They still need to add some more weapons. There's a lot of work to be done in New York. So if they want the weapon, but at a cheaper price, Tony Pollard could be the more affordable version of that running back for them rather than re-signing a Saquon Barkley. And now moving on to the final running back in today's video. This running back does not have the name value of the other running backs we've talked about today, but it is going to be Devin Singletary of the Houston Texans. And Singletary played surprisingly well in 2023, coming off of a year where he had almost 900 rushing yards and almost 200 receiving yards. Not a lot of touchdowns, only 4 total touchdowns, but he wasn't the starter for the entire year. Averaged about 9.8 fantasy points per game. Good for running back 36, so nothing to hang your hat on for fantasy football purposes. But I look at what Devin Singletary could do. I don't think this is a guy that you're signing to come in and be your bona fide starting running back, but I think Devin Singletary has shown enough that he is a guy that could come in and be a big part of what you do in your running back room moving forward. 26 years old, the calculated market value from an average annual salary is expected at $5.3 million. They are saying an estimated market value or a contract of 3 years for $16 million. Again, another guy coming off of his rookie deal. Now, the comparable players here are that same bunch that we just talked about. James Conner, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Joe Mixon. I think those guys are all probably better at the time of the signing of those contracts than Devin Singletary is at this time. So maybe he won't get as much money as those guys, but they're not necessarily projecting him to make the same amount of money as them either. So I look at where he could potentially be a good fit, somewhere where he could come in and be a big part of the running back room without actually needing to be the starter. And I think the first one that makes the most sense in my prediction for Devin Singletary is going to be the New England Patriots. And I look at what the Patriots have in their running back room right now. They're losing 44% of their carries and 12% of their targets in Ezekiel Elliott, who came in as a free agent in 2023. We know the running backs that they have on the roster right now, primarily Ramondre Stevenson being the one of value. Keyshawn Vaughn, JaMychal Hasty, Kevin Harris, these are the other guys. They're probably irrelevant to what is going to happen here. But Ramondre Stevenson and Devin Singletary could be the 1A, 1B in this backfield in New England as they're trying to find a new identity with new head coach Gerard Mayo. I look at the cap space situation. These guys could definitely be spenders as well. They have the second most cap space in the NFL, currently with $86 million available to them. So signing a $5 million average annual salary, Devin Singletary to this backfield is not going to break the bank. It's not going to blow your budget. I think it makes a lot of sense for Devin Singletary to end up in New England as the 1B to Ramondre Stevenson. And now the second team that I think could be a good fit for Devin Singletary is going to be the Tennessee Titans. And yes, I know, sound the alarms. Don't panic if you have Tyjae Spears. I like Tyjae Spears. I love Tyjae Spears as much as the next guy, but hear me out. They are going to add another running back to this room this offseason. The only thing that matters is the value of running back or the skill set of the running back that they are going to be adding. It needs to be less than Tyjae Spears. But if you think no running back is being added in Tennessee, you're probably crazy. They are going to add a running back. Now, I think this makes a lot of sense for Tennessee. Hear me out. This is a team that has a depth chart of Tyjae Spears, but behind him, Hassan Haskins, Jonathan Ward. Nobody of significance. They're losing Derrick Henry here, who was 63% of their carries in 2023, 8% of the targets. Obviously, a team that is very, very run heavy. And yes, they do have a new coach there, not Mike Vrabel anymore. It is Brian Callahan, so it could be a new identity here in Tennessee. Probably not the same Titans we've seen in years past, but I do think that they're going to bring another guy in. Devin Singletary makes a lot of sense because Tajay Spears could still be your starter, but you just lean on Devin Singletary a little bit. I don't think Tajay Spears has the bell cow size or the bell cow game to get 75% of your carries. I think you spell him with Devin Singletary on a team that has the third most cap space in the NFL right now, $85 million. I think this would be best case scenario for Tajay Spears if they add a guy like this, because Devin Singletary is not going to be stealing touches from Tajay Spears. He is just going to be spelling Tajay Spears. So the reason why we project this and the reason why we are trying to predict this is because if that worries you as somebody who is currently rostering Tajay Spears, maybe you consider selling high on Tajay right now to somebody who also believes he is going to be the bona fide RB1 bell cow type of running back in this Tennessee offense. But I do think that this makes a ton of sense for the Tennessee Titans from a NFL football perspective to add a guy like Devin Singletary to complement Tajay Spears. Now, that is all we have for you guys today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show our channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed and hitting that notification bell. That way you never miss any of our future videos. I will strongly suggest, if you want to hear us talk about the wide receivers and the quarterbacks in this free agent class, go watch the videos right here. They will help you out, I promise. And also make sure you guys are going down into the description and signing up for that free Discord. It is free to join. There is no risk in doing that. It's free, but we are in there talking Dynasty Fantasy Football 24/7, 365, helping you guys with rookie drafts, trades, waiver advice, Dynasty strategy, anything you guys can think of, we're helping you in that Discord. So like I said, one more time, it's free to join. Go join that Discord in the description. And with all of that out of the way, I will see you guys on our next video where we talk about the free agent tight ends. But until then, peace out.